This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue Weekend. I'm Xu Qinduo. Inflation, heightened geopolitical tensions, and the once-in-a-century pandemic have all led to lowered economic forecasts for the Asia-Pacific region. At APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in Thailand, Chinese President Xi Jinping called for APEC members to join hands to build an Asia-Pacific community with a shared future and take Asia-Pacific cooperation to a new high. What are the major challenges for the region in maintaining stability and economic growth? And what role will China play in the next stage of the region's development? To take a closer look at these questions and also the gathering of APEC leaders and outcome of the meetings, I'm glad to be joined today by Benoit Hadi-Chartrand, Adjunct Professor of Political Science and International Affairs at the Temple University in Japan, Dr. Ibrahim Kholilul Rohman, Senior Research Associate at Indonesia Financial Group Progress, and Teng Jianquan from China Institute for International Studies. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, welcome to the discussion, gentlemen. Jianqun, I will start with you. While speaking at the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, the Chinese president gave a speech titled "Shouldering Responsibility and Working Together in Solidarity to Build an Asia-Pacific Community with a Shared Future." What's your takeaway of the speech?
Yeah, this is actually a continuation of our president to continue the effort to enhance the cooperation in dealing with challenges in this region, and also gave some proposals or initiatives to the future of the cooperation. For example, the openness or inclusiveness of this region. Actually, in these years, I think the countries like the United States just have taken another approach to this region. Just would like to establish some block in economy and also in security. So I think it's very important for APEC countries to think about the future and to think about the importance of cooperation. Is a clear-cut direction given by our president.
Mm-hmm. It's like a crossroad, right? Yeah. Ibrahim, you are nodding your hand, and the presidency, talked about the importance of openness and inclusiveness. He said history has proven time and again that only openness, inclusiveness, and win-win cooperation is the right way forward for humanity. I guess that's also the right way forward, probably, for this region.
Yeah, talking about APEC countries is talking about 2.9 billion population, which is equal to almost 40% of global population. And if we count the size of the economy, it's more than 60% of global economy, amounting probably more than $50 trillion by 2020. So APEC region is very, very strong in determining the volume and the value of trade. Almost 50% of global trade happens between APEC member states. But as for now, we can see that the performance of the economy is not quite balanced. Some countries are already achieving a greater welfare, greater economic outcome, notably United States, Australia, Singapore, where they have probably average income by more than $50,000, where countries like PNG, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam are still very, very far behind. So cooperation, openness, and facilitating dialogue that can, improve the performance of all member states in equal manner would be very important to spur the performance of the economy in the region.
Yeah, Benoit, obviously, they are not developing, let's say, in a balanced way or inclusive way, as Ibrahim mentioned. Some countries are developing faster, some are probably more or less lagging behind. But also, Xi Jinping mentioned about openness. I guess, there's the concern probably, when we talk about the protectionism, in particular, practiced by the Donald Trump government over there. In the U.S., if you look at the domestic politics, there's a concern about, trade, free trade. They are not very popular, these terms, right?
No, absolutely. There's been a real trend in certain economies towards protectionism in the last few years. You very rightly pointed out the Donald Trump administration. He was, of course, the sort of leader, if I may say so, of this protectionist movement. And you've seen also a sort of slide towards greater advocacy of protectionism within the Republican Party as well. But it is certainly not the only economy. We've seen also other economies in the world who have been led by more or less populist leader over the last few years calling for greater protectionist measures. So it makes sense in this context, a context where we are seeing greater or some obstacles to free trade. And of course, there's a pandemic that has also posed greater walls preventing the free flow of trade. It makes perfect sense for the Chinese leader to talk about the need for greater openness. It's been part of the Chinese discourse for many years. In fact, we can go back all the way to 1979, of course, with the beginning of reform and opening. So these words from the Chinese president were perfectly in line with the discourse, the message we've been hearing from Beijing for many years now.
Mm-hmm. Ibrahim, the president also mentioned about a high standard free trade area of Asia Pacific, which is also I would say, midterm goal of APEC members, the 21 economies. That is also shortened as FTAAP, free trade area with the 21 economies. I mean, that's very inspiring if you think of like every economy is just opening, having a free trade with each other in such a strong economic area and with a larger population here.
Right. Yeah. If we recall back the transition of APEC trade regime before and after 1990s to 2020, 2018, just before COVID pandemic, we can observe that APEC countries has experienced a reduction in tariff from about average 30% to 5%, which then lead to the boosting of economic volume, trade volume between member states by almost 7 times. So undeniably, APEC region has enjoyed several policy trying to reduce tariff barrier between countries. But even so, as we mentioned, outcome of the cooperation is still unbalanced, and that's why probably some policies to make everybody in the same level of playing field will be favorable in the future, so that countries who are still left behind can catch up the lag and the gap between those who are already in the front runner in the economic progress. And talking about COVID pandemic, for instance, COVID has dropped down the volume by almost 3% since 2020, 2021. So it's very, very timely now when the pandemic has been mostly mitigated in all countries to see the future of cooperation between countries, getting the momentum from G20 meeting to see some better dialogue, to see the possibilities to open up better collaboration in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, Benoit, obviously, of course, when it comes to the free trade agreement, there are economic consideration for nations, economies, whether they are open in particular area, like in what degree they will be open. But also there are political concerns probably, especially now, we are seeing, for example, the competition or sometimes confrontation, Washington, Beijing here. I mean, that's more political than economic issues here. And after the meeting between the two leaders, do you think we are at probably at a better position to pursue a free trade area in this region?
Yes. So I imagine you were speaking about the meeting between Joe Biden and Xi
That's
Jinping.
right.
And indeed, I believe. Right, and I believe indeed it was a good step in the right direction, no doubt. I mean, as we all know, the bilateral relationships have been truly floundering over the last couple of years. This was the very first in-person meeting between the two leaders after I think it was 5 phone calls they've had over the last couple of years. And truly, even though meeting or speaking over the phone can have its use, there's no replacement. There's no antidote or nothing that's really going to bring relations forward better than in-person meetings. And the meeting, of course, was quite long. It was quite substantial, lasted more than 3 hours. And even though there was no true, I would say, comprehensive agreement. And this was not the purpose of the meeting, of course. But this meeting truly helped both leaders to explain their views to the others. And there was a real commitment we have seen from the declaration of both leaders after the meeting, a commitment to maintaining channels of communication open. And I think more than anything, this is the key to going forward, the key to maintaining stability in the bilateral relationships. Because yes, the economic challenges are massive, but the political challenges, the geopolitical challenges, I would say even the military challenges lying ahead are even more important than the economic challenges. So that's why meetings of that sort that will, help to set up guardrails for the future of the relationship are extremely important. So of course, these fundamental disagreements between China and the United States are still there. They will remain there, but more stability can still be obtained, at least with this dialogue between the two countries.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jianqun, obviously, stability and peace will help facilitate, free trade, more trade and investment. Probably similarly, more trade and investment also help maintain peace and stability. I guess, partly for that purpose, Xi Jinping mentioned, China will work with other parties on the full and high quality implementation of the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, 15 countries in there. China is one of the members, and continue working toward joining the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, probably with a bit higher standard, I would say, of free trade, and the DEPA, Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, digital economy rules, basically, for the purpose of promoting integrated development of the region. Obviously, there's an important role for China to play as the second largest economy and also largest trading nation.
Yeah, this is our intention, and this is our effort to increase or to enhance the economic cooperation or trade cooperation among all the parties concerned in this region. Actually, RCEP and some other mechanisms at this time, just to show the interests of all the countries in this region, they would like to enhance or to develop a very integrated regional trade cooperation in this area. So I think China will continue its effort in this regard, and of course will share the achievements of our development with any country in this region. If we have a comparison, we can get some, ideas from the regional, integration. For example, the idea proposed by the United States, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. 14 countries there, but without China. China as the largest world economy in this region. Why not China there? So this is actually a political regional framework, not the real framework for the trade cooperation and some other cooperation in this regard. So I think we should have new mentality and new ideas when we are thinking about regional integration and regional cooperation in developing a strong and more efficient economy in this region.
Mm-hmm. Well, sort of related to that, Ibrahim, the Chinese president, did mention in the previous speech that this region should not become the backyard of any country, and the test of big powers. No attempt to wage a new Cold War will ever be allowed by the people or by our times, in his words. I mean, also speaking at this CEO summit of the APEC, French President Emmanuel Macron also said that France wants to play a stabilizing role in the region to avert confrontation. Obviously referring to the US and China here, saying that we don't believe in hegemony, we don't believe in confrontation, we believe in stability. Can we say that, both presidents, and I would say together with absolute number of regional countries, they wish to continue with peace and stability instead of confrontation or even a new Cold War?
Right. Well, I think Benoit has been mentioned and has been explained from geopolitical perspective and from political point of view. Maybe I'll be approaching this matter from economic point of view. we see that now we're embracing potential recession and stagflation for some countries in 2023 next year. And I think the message from Chinese president probably can be interpreted as a caution for everybody. If we cannot cooperate, if we are not cooperating, then we are basically facing the same problem next year by potential of higher inflation, higher unemployment. Look, Chile, Peru, and the Philippines are already experiencing very high unemployment as part of the APEC countries. And when we see the root of problem, basically it stems from potentially deglobalization, among others, which some countries are trying to keep, lower trade that can be exported so that they want to secure their own needs and preventing exportation to other countries. So much that usually monetary policy will be helping to mitigate the problem. Interest policy is usually an effective way to reduce the price. But look, in many countries, inflation is still very, very high, even though central bank has been experiencing increase in many countries. So I think the reason is that, the reason of economic shock in the current period is probably mostly from supply side. Supply side means, we have to put everything on the table. We have to put everything as matter of dialogue, because without any cooperation, we are together will be facing a lot of difficulties in the future. And that's what Macron says, what President Xi also mentioned, that peaceful cooperation dialogue will be tools to facilitate better outcome that possibly happen next year.
Mm-hmm. Well, Benoit, we have the latest, the declaration of the ministers of the APEC. There's the declaration saying that they are committed to a free trade area of APEC, and also the goal, Bangkok goal, I think it is about, bio-green economy for this region. So what do you make of that? It seems that, at least the 21 economies agreed with each other that more free trade and more investment flow are necessary for their development.
Right, of course, I think that was something to be expected. The leaders before the G20 summit and before the APEC summit were talking about the need for greater cooperation, greater free trade. And of course, if we're talking about the United States, of course, the return of the Democrats to the White House also makes the environment more favorable for a greater push for free trade. So I think the outcome, although there's still one more day of the APEC summit, we're seeing that the leaders at least are becoming more in line, in tune with each other when it comes to the need for greater cooperation. I also appreciated the comments on climate change. I think this is something that we are hearing more and more every year of not only the APEC summit but also the G20 summits. The leaders are becoming more and more, I would say, aware of the expectations of people, of citizens in their countries for more action towards climate change. So I was happy to see that this is something that has been mentioned in the summit as well.
Mm-hmm. Jian Qun, Chinese president, said that Beijing is to consider holding the third Belt and Road Forum for international cooperation next year to give a new boost to development and prosperity in Asia Pacific and the wider world. We know that it's mostly infrastructure building, in particular for developing countries, which is in high demand, I would say. So next year marks the 10th anniversary of the establishment of the BRI. So how do you draw comment on the plan, probably, or the thinking of probably like are we seeing like more efforts, more investment of time, energy, and most important, obviously, the financial investment in this initiative there?
Yeah, this is a very important initiative given by President almost 10 years ago in Indonesia and in Kazakhstan, and together with another two initiatives, including the Global Development Initiative and Global Security Initiative. Actually, these initiatives are of great importance for Chinese people and also for the countries concerned. And these ideas, these initiatives have already got the positive response from countries all over the world. The intention of the Road and Belt initiative actually is very simple, that to say, China would like to share its achievements with all the parties concerned, all the countries concerned on the road, and also somewhere, not only with our neighboring countries, but also with countries like South Africa and Latin American countries. These are the effort or the international common products given by the Chinese people and the Chinese government. So I think the coming summit on Road and Belt Initiative in Beijing will give new driving forces to such an idea or initiative, and to show the effort given by the Chinese government to cooperate with all the parties concerned in this regard.
Ibrahim, we know that as developing countries, in both Indonesia and China, they are from China's own experience, it is important to build a road, highways, ports, export, airports, etc. For long-term development. You have to lay the infrastructure for the takeoff of the economy. In Indonesia, obviously, there's a Belt and Road Initiative. Probably the most outstanding one is the Jakarta-Bandung highway line over there. How is it going? What's the public response?
Yeah, I think Indonesia is transforming the country towards more modern, more open. Government has initiated to shift the capital city from Jakarta to somewhere in Kalimantan. So the development of infrastructure is very important, especially during President Jokowi era, where infrastructure has been the backbone of the development, extending the development not to be centered in one particular country, but also spread out to all over the country. So the cooperation with China government in relation to the modern transportation infrastructure is one among the milestones which probably will lead towards other development, modernization in transportation and infrastructure in general. So if we see the common reception is very positive, but of course we want to see the end of the project, because as for now we are at the mid of the project development. But we are very optimistic because traditionally Indonesia and China has been cooperating since long time. China is the major export destination for Indonesia, amounting probably about 25%. And China's investment in Indonesia is also quite big. Since last year, it has been almost $3 billion, or equal to 10% of total FDI in Indonesia. So not only about recent development infrastructure, but the cooperation between China and Indonesia have been, showing a greater potential in the future. But I think the next step will be, building possibility for transfer of technology, because as the recipient of the project, we are in Indonesia also wanting to get more than physical artifact and infrastructure, but also the know-how and the technology, like what China has been developed, so that it will be very important for us to get transfer of technology if possible, so that we can also catch up the technological gap between those who are already in the front runner of the technology development.
Jianqun, obviously for the next stage, the expectation is for China to share, for example, technology, the know-how with the developing countries, like Indonesia and other countries in the region, to develop it together, to empower the people, empower the population, to further, explore or unleash the potential of the country.
Yeah, this is actually a very simple logic for China to give more and more international or public products to the countries concerned. Because, for example, when we are fighting against the COVID-19 pandemic, some other countries, especially our neighboring countries, are also suffering such a pandemic. So if only the pandemic or the COVID-19 completely eliminated, I think we can enjoy a safe and secure environment of our life. So this is a very simple policy. We should share our ideas, not only ideas, but also some products or achievements with the countries concerned, with our neighboring countries, so we can have a more and more safe and secure social life, and that's the idea of the core common community with shared future.
With shared future,
Yeah.
that's right. On the sidelines of the APEC summit, this week Chinese President Xi Jinping also had the first official meeting, person to person, with the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida. Benoit, how do you summarize the conversation between the two leaders? After quite some time, finally they met each other and had appeared a very nice conversation there.
Yeah, I was very much looking forward to that meeting and to see what the outcome was going to be. It was probably after in the recent week after the Biden-Xi summit, the meeting, I would say that was the second most important bilateral meeting. It was the first summit meeting between China and Japan in almost 3 years. So that, it gives you an idea of how frosty relations have become recently. Before the pandemic, there was a bit of a impetus and a bit of a momentum towards improving ties. Now this declined, the relationship declined again since the beginning of the pandemic. So now that they had this meeting, I think we could see some cautious steps on both sides towards reestablishing the bilateral relationship on a firmer ground. In the last few years, Japan, I would say, has been more willing to criticize China on various aspects that are of concern to Japan, and this is one of the reasons why the bilateral relationships has been declining somewhat over the last few years. But speaking of the meeting itself, so we could see again on both sides that there was a recognition of the importance of the bilateral relationship. Both President Xi and Prime Minister Kishida made some clear statements about that after the meeting. However, there's no doubt that some of the tensions that have been occurring over the last few years also were addressed within the meeting. Kishida said that he addressed, for example, some of Japan's concern regarding tensions surrounding the Taiwan Strait, surrounding the East China Sea as well. The question of Ukraine was raised. So there remains a number of issues on which both sides don't see eye to eye, and it's going to be difficult to reconcile their very different positions. But just as was the case with the Biden-Xi summit, this bilateral meeting, I think, is really essential to put again this relationship towards a better future and making sure it does not derail as it did about 7 or 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, Benoit has mentioned about the concerns probably from both sides, and it's always good to have a face-to-face meeting between the leaders so they can address the issue directly and probably lay out some plan to really resolve some of the concerns from both sides. As President Xi mentioned, these two countries are absolutely important to each other, and we have to make sure the relationship will be on the right track.
Yeah, you're right. I think this year marks the 50th anniversary of the normalization of diplomatic ties between China and Japan. And the two leaders meeting, of course, gave a very positive impact on the future development of the relationship between the two sides, including trade, politics, and economy. So I think the two countries should try their best to give more and more positive impact on the environment and on the development and also on the security in Northeast Asia and also in Asia Pacific region.
And also remember, they have a strong economic relationship. Japan's largest trading partner is China. Japan is one of the most important trading partners for China, right? So, I mean, it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and we need to probably make it work as we expected there. Well, on that note, we concluded today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.